You're standing in a scrapyard at 6 in the morning, breath fogging in the cold, staring up at a 40-foot steel box that somebody's about to sell you for $250. The corners are rusted. There's a dent in the side panel the size of a small car. The previous owner just wants it gone before the next port inspection. And you, if you know what you're doing, are about to walk away with a skeleton of a home that will outlive you. But here's the part nobody tells you at that scrapyard. The moment you sign that paper, you've just bought yourself the easiest way to die slowly inside your own house. Because a shipping container sealed up wrong, buried wrong, ventilated wrong, is not a shelter. It's a coffin with windows. And most of the people chasing this dream right now, the ones watching the same videos you've watched, are about to learn that the hard way. Let me tell you something real before we go any further. In 2019, a couple in rural Texas put almost $40,000 into a container build and had to abandon it 8 months later because the walls were sweating so badly the insulation turned into a black mold farm. In Bonita Springs, Florida, a man named Joseph Dupuis built one of the most photographed container homes in the country for around $36,000 total. And he'll tell you straight up, the savings only happen if you understand the steel before you cut into it. The International Organization for Standardization rates these boxes, the standard 20 and 40-foot units, to carry up to 59,000 pounds of cargo stacked 9 high on the open ocean in a hurricane. That is the machine you are buying for the price of a used dirt bike. And almost nobody coming into this world understands what they actually have in their hands. So here's the gap. Everybody talks about the price. $250 for a wind and watertight container at the bottom of the market. $400 for a slightly better one, $1,500 to $3,000 for a clean one-trip unit that's basically brand new. Those numbers are real. I've seen them. You can find them right now in auction listings out of Houston, Savannah, Long Beach, Newark. But the price is the bait. The trap is everything that comes after. The cutting, the sealing, the foundation, the airflow. The floor that was treated with pesticides so toxic the Australian government has been arguing about them for 20 years. That's where people lose their money, their health, and sometimes their lives. And that's where we're going in this video. Not the Pinterest version, the real one. The version where you actually end up with a home for life instead of a rusted out monument to a bad weekend decision. Stay with me, because what I'm about to walk you through is the exact sequence I'd follow if I had to start over tomorrow with nothing but $250 in a patch of land. And if you want to know how regular people are quietly stepping off the mortgage treadmill using boxes like this one, hit subscribe and stick around, because the part most builders skip is coming up in a few minutes, and it's the part that decides whether your container lasts 10 years or 50. And while you're at it, drop a comment and tell me, honestly, would you live in one of these? 40 feet of steel, no neighbors, no mortgage? Yes or no? I read them. I want to know who's actually serious about this and who's just curious. Now let's get into the steel itself, because here's what I need you to understand about a shipping container. It is not a house. It was never designed to be a house. It was designed to be stacked, slammed, frozen, baked, soaked in salt spray, and dropped from cranes for 25 years straight. The corten steel they're made of, that weathering steel with the copper and chromium in it, develops a stable rust layer that actually protects the metal underneath. That's why you see old containers with that orange patina that never seems to get worse. The structural strength is all in the corners and the rails, the top rail, the bottom rail, and those 4 corner castings. Cut into the wrong place and you've just turned a fortress into a tent. I've watched people slice a giant window opening into the long side of a 40-footer without adding a single piece of reinforcement steel, and within a year the roof was sagging 2 inches in the middle. The fix cost them more than the container did. The rule is simple. Every cut you make, you replace with steel. Tube steel, angle iron, welded back in to carry the load the original panel was carrying. If you're putting in a door, you frame it. If you're putting in a window, you frame it. If you're cutting out a whole wall to join 2 containers, you build a structural beam across the top before you ever touch the grinder. This is the first place people go broke. They buy the cheap container, then they pay a welder $12,000 to fix the damage they did in one afternoon with a plasma cutter they rented from the hardware store. Remember what I said at the start. The box is cheap. Everything you do to it is where the money hides. And then there's the floor. Listen to me on this one, because it's the thing almost nobody warns you about until it's too late. The original plywood floor in almost every used shipping container on Earth has been treated with a pesticide cocktail, usually something with permethrin, sometimes worse, sometimes containing chemicals like tributyl oxide or chlorpyrifos depending on the era and the country of origin. They do this to stop insects from crossing borders inside the wood. The treatment soaks into the plywood for the life of the container. You cannot sand it out. You cannot seal it away with a coat of paint and call it done. If you're going to live in this thing, that floor either comes out completely or it gets covered with a proper vapor barrier and a new subfloor on top. People skip this step to save $1,000 and then wonder why their kids have headaches every morning. Don't be that person. Now here's where the thread I want you to hold on to through this whole video really tightens. The error is always the same. People treat the container like it's already a house. It isn't. It's a shell. And a steel shell sealed in the sun becomes an oven. Sealed in the cold becomes a freezer. Sealed in humidity becomes a sweating, dripping cave that grows mold faster than you can scrub it. The single most important system in a container home is not the kitchen. It's not the solar. It's not the composting toilet everybody on YouTube wants to show you. It's the envelope. Insulation, vapor control, and ventilation. Get that wrong and nothing else matters. Closed cell spray foam applied directly to the inside of the steel walls at a thickness of at least 2 inches gives you an R value around 13 to 14. And just as important, it acts as its own vapor barrier. That's why experienced container builders pay for it, even though it costs $2 to $3 per square foot. Fiberglass bats shoved into stud walls inside the container are the cheap route, and they are also the route that ends in mold within 3 winters because the warm interior air hits the cold steel and condenses behind the insulation where you can't see it. By the time you notice the smell, the damage is already structural. On paper, fiberglass works. Down there, inside a steel box in a real climate, it doesn't. Ventilation is the other half. A sealed container with 2 people breathing in it will hit dangerous carbon dioxide levels in a matter of hours. You need cross ventilation. You need an HRV or ERV unit if you're in a serious climate, a heat recovery or energy recovery ventilator that swaps stale inside air for fresh outside air without dumping all your heat. You need vents at high and low points. You need to think about airflow the way a submarine designer thinks about airflow, because functionally that's what you're building. A small, sealed, human-occupied steel volume. The math is not optional. Look, if you've made it this far into the video, you're not the casual viewer. You're the one who's actually thinking about doing this. And here's the truth. Everything I'm walking you through, the exact steel reinforcement patterns, the cut diagrams with the load calculations already done, the foundation specs for different soil types, the ventilation sizing tables, the floor remediation steps, the full materials list with current prices, the mistakes that quietly cost people tens of thousands of dollars, all of it is laid out step by step in the container home blueprint I put together. Links in the description. It's the manual. I wish somebody had handed me the first time I stood in a scrapyard staring at one of these boxes. If you're serious, grab it before you spend $1 on steel. All right, let's keep going because we haven't even talked about the ground yet, and the ground is where more container builds fail than anywhere else. You cannot just drop a 40-foot steel box on dirt. You can't. The container will twist as the ground settles unevenly, and once it twists, the doors stop closing, the welds crack, the roof starts to pond water, and you're done. The minimum, the absolute minimum, is 4 concrete piers, 1 under each corner casting, poured below the frost line for your region. In northern climates, that might be 48 inches deep. In Texas, it might be 18. In Florida, you're dealing with sand, and you might need helical piles instead. The corner castings are where all the load transfers. That's by design. The container is engineered to be supported at those 4 points. Support it anywhere else, and you're fighting the engineering instead of using it. If you want to go underground with one, and I know some of you are thinking about it because the idea of a buried container shelter sounds incredible, you need to stop and think very carefully. A standard shipping container is not designed to take lateral load from soil pressing in on the sides. It is designed to take vertical load on the corners, bury one without a reinforced concrete shell around it, and the walls will buckle inward the first time the ground gets saturated with rain. There are people who've done buried container projects successfully, but every single one involved an engineered concrete vault around the steel or massive internal bracing welded in before burial. The famous case people always bring up, the guy in Texas who buried a container as a storm shelter back in the early 2000s, ended up with caved-in walls within a couple of years. Above ground, the container is a beast. Below ground, without the right preparation, it's paper. So, what does the real build look like, start to finish, for someone with almost no money? Here's the path. You find your container through a wholesaler, not a retailer. You're looking at companies that move thousands of units a year out of port cities. You're looking for a wind and water tight grade unit, the cheapest tier that still seals. You inspect it in person if you can, or you pay for a third-party inspection if you can't. You check the CSC plate, the data plate on the door for the build year and the cargo history. You walk the roof for dents that hold water. You walk the floor for soft spots. You check every weld at the corner posts. You pay your $250 to maybe $800 depending on the market that month, and you arrange transport, which by the way is often more expensive than the container itself. Sometimes $2 to $4 per loaded mile from the port to your land. Then you prep your site. You pour your piers. You set the container with a crane or a tilt bed delivery truck, which is the smart play because the delivery driver can place it directly on your piers if you've prepped them right. You strip out the original floor. You cut your openings, framing every single one with welded steel before you ever pull the cut piece out. You spray foam the interior. You frame your interior walls with light steel studs or wood. You run your electrical and conduit because you're inside a giant Faraday cage, and that has implications. You plan your plumbing with the understanding that you cannot bury pipes in a steel floor. So your wet wall runs along one interior surface. You install your ventilation. You put down your new subfloor over a vapor barrier. And then only then do you start thinking about the finishes that make it feel like a home. Total cost, done carefully, done right, for a basic 40-foot single container home with off-grid power and water, sits somewhere between $15,000 and $35,000 depending on your region and how much labor you do yourself. That is a home for life, on land you own, with no mortgage payment hanging over your head for the next 30 years. The $250 container is the seed. Everything else is the discipline of building it right. And here's the part I want you to hold on to. The error is always the same. People rush, they see the cheap steel, and they think the cheap steel is the whole answer. It isn't. The steel is the easy part. The thinking is the hard part. The planning, the sequencing, the understanding of what you're actually working with, that's what separates the people living comfortably in their container homes a decade later from the people who walked away with $20,000 in losses and a rusting box in a field. If I were starting tomorrow with nothing, here's exactly what I'd do. I'd spend the first month not buying anything. I'd spend it learning. I'd study the load paths. I'd study my local building codes because yes, in most jurisdictions, container homes are regulated and you need to know what your county allows before you spend a dime. I'd visit a container yard in person and just walk through units, touching the steel, opening the doors, looking at the floors, asking questions. I'd find one or two people in my region who've already done this and I'd buy them dinner in exchange for an hour of honest conversation about what they do differently. And only then, with a plan written down and a budget that includes the boring stuff like permits and site prep and ventilation, would I make the call to the wholesaler. The final warning, the one I want you to remember when you close this video and go back to your life. A shipping container home is one of the most powerful tools regular people have right now to escape the trap of permanent debt. It is also one of the easiest ways to lose everything if you treat it like a craft project. Respect the steel, respect the envelope, respect the ground. Do it in that order, and that $250 box really can become a home for life. Cut corners on any one of those three, and it becomes the most expensive mistake you'll ever make. So tell me in the comments what's stopping you from starting. Is it the land, the money, the permits, the fear of getting it wrong? Be honest, because the next video I'm putting together is going to tackle exactly that. The part where you actually find affordable land, you can legally put one of these on, and I want to build it around the real obstacles you're facing, not the ones I assume. Drop it below. I'll see you in the next one.